Yes, guys, welcome back to another video. We're going to have some fun today with 10 of the most highly touted draft midfielders for the 2024 season. Now, I've done this one a little bit differently. So usually I'll just give you kind of, my ratings or a phantom draft, that sort of thing. In this one, I've actually got a matrix informing my decisions here. So we've got different skills, different athletic traits, and the game kind of broken down into the clearance, as we're dealing with midfielders, the clearance phase and the transition phase, and then some athletic attributes to go with it as well. So we can actually give like a points rating and try to kind of inform our decisions a little bit better. And you can kind of see in this some of the values that I have when I'm looking at players week to week, what I'm actually basing them on and what I notice, and then able to kind of bring that into data and share that with you guys. So I'm really excited about this, but I would preface that it's not, it's not the be all and end all. And there's some, there's a lot of intangible things that aren't in this. There's a lot of even tangible things that aren't in this. So, you can't look at things like competitiveness or spirit or leadership and stuff like that. So it's very raw and it will give some outcomes that you might not expect, but we'll go through it. So number one, it's cleanliness. Basically, are your hands clean? And this is in the stoppage phase of the game. So at stoppage, when there's a lot of traffic around, there's a lot of bodies around, can you actually take the ball cleanly? Ball winning ability, so your sort of clearance numbers, your ground ball, and you can test a possession, which will show up there. Like how often do you really, the clearance happens, how often do you actually come up with the ball? Your decision making when under pressure. So in that environment, when there are a lot of bodies around, again, you've got to make quick decisions, who makes the best ones. So we're rating them on that. Then you've got kicking, which is more of an outside skill and more that I've got in the transition phase of the game. So you've got variation, so different types of kicks, like around the body, when you're moving at speed. You've got, are your teammates actually going to give you the ball? Are you receiving the ball a lot from your teammates? Do they trust you with ball in hand? And then also your penetration. So, if I'm a midfielder who can't kick the ball any more than 30 meters, I don't really want to be receiving the ball at half back because I'm going to be really easy for the defense to set up against because I can't kick it over them. Speed and explosiveness, which, you can have both or either or. Running patterns. So running patterns for a midfielder are really, a transition part of the game, mainly with being able to get involved in the link and sort of where you run on the field to be able to get the ball. There's smarter areas on the field that you can run and more efficient ways that you can run to get the ball and not use up as much energy. Then you've got power, strength, and tackling ability there. Repeat running and endurance is first, actually. I'll skip one there. So repeat running and endurance. Can you butter up basically and go again with those big sprints? You don't want to be really lumbering and just an endurance athlete. You want to be able to do it at high speed repeatedly. So then you've got power, strength, and tackle breaking ability and sort of one-on-one. So your real physical strength here is judged. Versatility, so can you just play as a midfielder or are you someone that can go forward, hit the scoreboard? Can you go behind the ball if needed? And that comes into your athletic profile as well as your footballing ability. And then you've got agility, which is pretty straightforward as well. And then that gets marked. That's 10 things. And what will be informing that is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 system. So 5 being elite, 1 being poor. As we go down, you've got above average, average, and below average. And then that'll be a rank out of 50, which will put us into a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 10, basically. So there. And I've also got player comparisons to go with these guys. So if you're not really familiar with the draft, you can kind of get a bit better. I don't really like comparing players too much to AFL players, but there is, it helps. If you don't know much about the draft, it kind of helps understand, well, this guy that we're going to be picking up is similar to this guy. So I like to go through that. So I won't waste any more time. Let's get into the list, starting with the number one, which is no surprises from anyone with me. It is FinnO'Sullivan, who I think is the ultimate full package midfielder here. He's someone with versatility to boot, he's upside to boot. He has so much athletic prowess, but I think he's also a really, really top level footballer. It's not just about the upside with Finn. Now, there's been problems this season. Obviously, there's been injuries, that sort of thing. Foss is 182 centimeters. I'd be surprised if he's still sitting at that number. I reckon he's more like 185, maybe even 186 at the moment. He looks like he's grown considerably since last year. We look at the first 3, which are the clearance sort of inside, majorly inside things like the cleanliness, the ball winning, and the decision making. So I've given him a 5 for the cleanliness. He rarely fumbles the ball, Finn. He's, beautiful in that phase of the game. His raw numbers as far as outcome, if like you throw 3 guys into the midfield and you want them to win the clearance, he hasn't been able to show this season that he's able to be that productive and that inevitable at finding the ball. So not a high disposal count player at the moment, but he was last year, so it still is there. He was averaging 20 to 25 last year, so I think it's still there, but this season just hasn't really been able to put it together with injury. So I've marked him as an average in that just on the numbers. His decision-making, I've given an above average 4 because I've seen glimpses of him be able to get first hands on the footy and just fire off some of those, outrageous sort of handballs out the back of his head and that kind of stuff where I can't even see it from the crowd and he's executed something ridiculous. So I think it's there with him, but I haven't given him a 5 just because we haven't really seen the prolific nature enough. His kicking is a 5 for me. He can execute all different types of kicks. He can hit it at speed. He's got max penetration. He can kick long-range goals. He can burst out of the stoppage and just he's so damaging. You could see him picking the ball up deep inside the defensive 50. He can pump it long or he can find that short 45 kick as well. So he really has everything and all the potential in the world with his kicking. His speed and explosiveness also 5. He's got a really interesting athletic profile, FinnO'Sullivan. He's got this real sort of explosive agility and you see him bouncing around when he's going from, that first kind of 2 to 3 meters that he runs. It's so bouncy and so explosive. And then he's got the big long strides. He's got long legs, which really get up ahead of steam and get him going. And that means that you could sort of see him playing in a variety of roles. You could imagine him playing on the wing. You could imagine him playing on ball because of his, inside skills as well. And you could also, with his overhead marking and the bounce that he has, it has made me say that he he's a little bit cat-like in the way that he sort of, bounces around on his feet. His running patterns, I've given a 3 just because he hasn't been able to find the footy as much this season. I haven't watched him off the ball a heck of a lot just due to the fact that he hasn't played that much. His repeat running and his endurance base, I think, is massive. He's able to get from a defensive 50. He's involved in the chains multiple times across chains. So that sort of shows you from D50 to forward 50, and he finds space by outworking his opponent. His power, his strength and tackle breaking ability, I've given an above average 4. Some people have kind of commented to me that he lacks a little bit of physicality. I haven't really seen that too much myself, just an opinion. I think he's pretty much stands up in the tackles. I haven't seen him sort of win 1-out contests inside forward 50, so that's maybe a deficiency, but seems really fairly strong through the core to me and has a pretty good athletic base to be able to deal with that sort of thing. So I see that as something at least that he can get through. And then his agility is, of course, a 5. Just unbelievable pounce on him. If you put, say, a Cozzy Pickett as the benchmark of a explosive agility, FinnO'Sullivan feels not too far away for me. It gives him a 44 out of 50 score, which is unbelievable. And his player comparisons that I've gone there are, I think he's a mix between an Isaac Smith, the outside running and long stride, long kicking, penetrative kicking. He could sort of play a wing role like Isaac Smith, and then he could go inside and play like a Josh Kelly or a Noah Anderson. I think his overhead marking skills when he goes forward are a little bit Noah Anderson-like. He has that sort of lanky type build that's very wiry. He's very sticky with how the ball kind of sticks to his hands, and just think it's untapped potential with FinnO'Sullivan. And for me, the all-round combination, he has to sit at number 1. Coming in at number 2 then is Jagger Smith, who has put together an unbelievable season, really. We have to praise this guy for what he's done. I think if you're talking about draft range, there's deficiencies in his game, but what he's put together, and as far as just if you want to pick a midfielder, that's the safest choice and you know that he's going to work super, super hard, he's going to do everything he can to be a top-level professional, I think Jagger Smith ticks the safety box. If I was in the risk management part of the recruiting, you'd be going, that's the safe bet, 100%. He's 180 centimetres and 5'4" I've given him for the 3 clearance phases. His ball handling is exceptional. I saw him in that game against the Allies in the wet. Had bulk disposals, contested possession, and he made everyone look a bit silly how the ball was actually being handled like a bar of soap and he was just able to handle it like it was a dry day. He's averaged 35 disposals in the Coates Talent League. So the ball winning, the clearance ground ball phase there's no one better. If I bounce a ball in the middle of the ground, I just know Jagger Smith is going to get it. I've given him 4 for decision making, and I don't really think it's a decision making thing. It's more like limitations in his game. So sometimes I find he'll come out of the stoppage and he'll be going with a real forward momentum at goals, and he's always looking for that handball as opposed to driving it with his boot. So more looking to release teammates as opposed to doing it himself, and I think sometimes he could just be a little bit more direct there. But what I want to say about Jagger's season, I think if you look at the halfway point, he was doing that a lot more. He had a worse kick-to-handball ratio, and I even think that some of the kicks that I've seen him execute in the last couple of weeks, it looks like he's got a little bit of extra meterage. There was a goal against the Sandringham Dragons at the weekend where I actually said to the guy sitting next to me, he won't make the distance, and he put it through post height. So I think he's working on those aspects of his game, and that's what you're going to get with Jagger Smith. You're going to get a superior work rate, someone that does everything they can to be the best. His speed, we'll go to his kicking there. So I've given him a 3 for that. It does have deficiencies, as I've said. And you wouldn't really want Jagger picking up the ball deep because the defense knows that he's not going to be able to kick it through you, really. His speed and explosiveness is a 5 just purely on the speed factor. His explosiveness isn't really there. He doesn't break tackles and doesn't have that sort of impact when he launches, but still a quick guy and a very agile guy, as we'll get to in a second. Running patterns are elite. I think the way he gets up and down the ground and just is an option for his teammate and burns off his opponent consistently, runs to really smart areas to receive the ball. You don't get average 35 disposals without doing that. His repeat running, his repeat sprints, he plays football at such a high intensity. It's really brilliant to watch. His power, his strength, and his tackle breaking, I've given him a 2, so a below average there because he is a smaller frame, and outside stoppage situations, I haven't really seen him win one-on-ones at all. Versatility, an average, because I don't think you can play him anywhere outside the midfield. And the agility is obviously a 5. I think he's the most agile player in this draft, albeit with not the explosiveness of a Finn-O'Sullivan. So Jagger ends up with 42 out of 50, comes in as second, and my player comparison there is Zach Butters, who, it's not perfect. Butters is certainly a better kick of the footy, I'd say, more penetrative and a better ball user there, but I think they share some of the same factors as far as agility and their stoppage work goes. So we'll move on to number 3, which may surprise a few here. It's coming with South Australian Sid Draper, who I absolutely love as a player. And if you look at those first 2 that we went through, Finn-O'Sullivan and Jagger Smith, I think Sid Draper's probably somewhere like the perfect mix of both of those players. Now, I think he has the explosiveness and the athleticism and the speed of a Finn-O'Sullivan, but then he has some of those ball-winning traits that Jagger Smith has. So fits as a really nice in-betweener, and the numbers kind of back that up here with how I've gone. So clean hands, of course, 5, rarely fumbles. Most of these guys don't. His ball-winning ability is a 4, so between Foss's 3 and Jagger's 5. Doesn't have the sheer inevitability at stoppage as Jagger Smith has, but he's still an above average player in that area. Picks up, bulk disposals in a lot of his games and even has done that at the top level or the SANFL senior level. His decision making, I've given a 4. Now, I haven't watched, being South Australian, I haven't watched him as closely as I've watched some of the other guys, and I haven't been able to go to his live games. So that's a detrimental factor for me. I think he makes pretty good decisions. What I would say here is he's more from what I've seen with his stoppage work, he's like first receive. So he's not getting the ball like first hands on it and then having to make those decisions. He's more being able to be a direct player. He receives the ball and he's able to stream out and use his leg speed and his power to get out. And that's kind of how they've used him. I think his decision making is still really good. So it's above average, but just not the top level. Just haven't seen him pull off some of those like ridiculous, like nousy ones from the stoppage centre. So his kicking, I've gone with 4. I think he executes a wide variety of kicks. He doesn't have the penetration of some top-level players. His kicking inside 50, particularly at speed, is really exceptional, but I've gone with above average for his kicking. Speed and explosiveness, 5. I think he's got a wonderful balance of when he hits top speed, he's absolutely firing. And when he gets that like first couple of steps, it's really explosive and he's able to break tackles. which draws players to him, which opens up more space for his team, and that's why it's such an important skill to have. His running patterns, I've given him 4. As I said, haven't seen him live as much, but his disposal count would say that he's above average. And that repeat running, endurance sprinting, like that's a real factor for Sid Draper. I think he's so good at that. He hits high speeds, and he seems to be able to stay at those high speeds consistently throughout a game. So I've given him 5 for that one. His power, his tackle breaking, and his one-on-one, I've given a 4. Just probably the sheer one-on-one. Like I can't imagine him parked inside forward 50, like winning a one-on-one contest like that. Versatility a 3, because I don't think he really plays anywhere else on the field. He's really just your centre bounce midfielder, albeit a really top-level classy one. And then agility, I've given him a 4. So not in the FinnO'Sullivan, Jagger Smith level in agility, but still a very competent player in that area. Someone that can get out of traffic, run away from people, and make you look a little bit silly. I've given him a 42 out of 50, which is actually the same as Jagger Smith. It's just that I've gone with Jagger ahead of him. His player similarity I've gone with here is Caleb Sarong. Again, not a perfect player comparison, but someone with that low centre of gravity, pretty good at breaking tackles, pretty good at winning clearances. I think Draper's potentially got more in the burst aspect of his game than Caleb Sarong, but Caleb Sarong probably does some other things around the stoppage a little bit better than what Sid Draper does. But Sid Draper's another one that's sort of been positioned anywhere from like 10 to number 1 in this draft. So I quite like this with Foss, Jagger, and Sid Draper as the top 3 there. So I'm really happy with that. So number 4, and this one probably will surprise a few. You're probably expecting to see Levi Ashcroft or Josh Smiley start to bob their head up. But as is this particular matrix, which is a projective apparatus here, it's come in with Sam Lawler. So Lawler's a 187 centimetre, kind of a prototype of like the Christian Petrarca, Dustin Martin, sort of real contest forward of centre type midfielder. And he's an interesting one because he's more of a multi-sport athlete, which I think when you're talking about projecting, and not that my matrix doesn't really factor any of this in anyway, but he's come from cricket, and I think recruiters really see this guy as being someone that projects really well, but maybe isn't putting it absolutely all together at the moment. So he represents some risk, but the upside could be enormous on this guy. With cleanliness, I've given him a 5. Again, these top players, they rarely do fumble the ball. His ball winning ability and sort of, ability to win the ball at clearance, I've given a 4, just because, and this is a bit of a theme with Lawler, he can sort of drift out of the game. Like, I watched him at Oakley, against Oakley, the other week, and had a first quarter where he barely touched the ball, and then he ended up getting around his 25 touches for the game. So he has bursts where he's doing really, really well. So he's sort of a momentum type player at the moment, but probably lacks a bit of like solidity and consistency in his game just to go like from start to finish and just keep picking up the ball regularly. He has played forward a lot too, which have affected his numbers in the national championships where he played more as a pure forward. But 27 disposals in the Coates League still gives him an above average 4 for sort of predictability of winning the ball. His decision making, again, really good, albeit I haven't seen him to that absolute top level, just be a consistent ball winner at clearance and be able to be making those decisions where he's coming in and out of traffic and being able to make the right decision all the time. Like, he still sometimes can be rushed into a bit of just a clearing kick out of the congestion, which is not a massive red flag, but just something that if we're judging him on at the moment is something. In the transition phase of the game, his kicking, I've given him an above average 4 here as well. He has a huge amount of penetration in that boot. So again, I talk about that ability to be able to pick up the ball anywhere and drive the team long, get them out of trouble. You don't want to be stuck with a guy that can only kick the ball 30 metres, receiving the ball off half back. It's really predictable for the other team to set up around. So that's a really good sign for Lawler. And it also means that he can kick long range goals when he does push forward as well. His speed and his explosiveness are a 5, of course. He gets up a real head of steam. He can break tackles. He comes out of clearance, and he looks so exciting when that happens. And I'll fast forward over to the power, strength, tackle breaking, which I also gave him a 5, because you can literally park this guy inside forward 50, and almost guarantee a goal. And there's not many other midfielders in this draft that you could say that about. His repeat running and sprinting, I've given a 2 because that's where I worry a little bit just with how he gets his stats. Like the fact that he can maybe get 1 or 2 disposals in a quarter and then get 10 in the next one. I think that maybe is a factor when you talk about that multi-sport athlete and maybe being a little bit, he's probably played quite a bit of football, but at the top level and having the fitness base to be able to play at under 18 elite level football and then go to the AFL could be a little bit different. So I've marked him down there. Versatility is a 5 because you could play this guy anywhere on the field. You could play him inside defensive 50 and he'd take intercept marks, as is his overhead strength. You can play him inside mid. You can play him as a 1 out forward as well. So much scope there for improvement. And then agility, I've given him a 3 because he doesn't, like 187, more of a stocky strength guy as opposed to someone that's kind of limbering his way out of the contest. So he ends up with a 41 out of 50, which leaves him in 4th on my list. The perfect player really for me is Petrarca. I think he's better overhead than Dustin Martin. So he's more of someone that you could rely on to kind of float across and take a big mark inside forward 50, which we saw in the national championships. But he's really a midfielder at heart, and I think he'll be drafted as a midfielder. I expect as this season continues, and if he has a really good final series, he could be looming as a top 3 pick. I've got him at 4 at the moment, but yeah, the sky, like untapped potential really for Sam Lawler, and the player really that everyone's trying to find at the moment is that sort of explosive, fast twitch kind of forward of centre mid. So he could go anywhere in this draft. Josh Smiley comes in next at 5th, and it's been a weird season for Josh Smiley. Like, was sort of clear number 1 at the beginning of the year early on, just racking up 30 disposals and kicking a goal. Hasn't been able to go with that same sort of intensity for the back half of the year. He certainly has some traits, but I think there's the real like top end of his skill set that hasn't really been tapped into. Just he hasn't been able to show that consistently enough to be like, okay, I'm definitely getting the sort of Paddy Cripps, which has brought him back into this pack, which could see him go anywhere from, I think, pick 3 to pick 10, but he's still certainly in with a chance of that number 1 pick. So cleanliness 5, he's brilliant there. I think maybe the only time we sort of lapsed on that cleanliness was more due to his size in the wet at Icon Park. He was a bit clumsy over the ground ball there, being able to get down and handle that bar of soap. His ability to wing clearance is big, particularly at junior level, because he can use his strength so much. So 25 disposals. I've given him a 4 there. I don't think the way that he plays at clearance is as sustainable as someone like an Ashcroft or a Jagger Smith, because it is so much reliant on strength. But he is really good at that phase of the game, and you can tell he's a tall player, mid 190 centimeters. He's a player that's clearly a footballer at heart. He's not just a big guy that you're throwing in there. And I think his decision making is pretty good. He's able to release teammates out of there. He often does a lot of the work himself for the Eastern Rangers, so I think he's going to have to, he comes out, wins a clearance, he's got guys hanging off him, he's throwing them away, and then he's sort of the one that's just driving them inside 450. At AFL, he's going to have to work in more of a unit, more of a team for sure. His kicking, I've got as a 4. He's a good kick, particularly for that size of player. He's not a... I'd say when he's kicking goals from like outside 50, that's a real strength of his. Like, you can see that penetration in the boot. I think sometimes, and this goes into the decision making as well, if there's pressure on him and he can't sort of break that initial tackle, he does get thrown into this sort of kick where he leans back on it a little bit and it just floats up in the air, and it's so easy to mark for intercept defenders. I've given him a 3 for speed and explosiveness. Some people have described him as explosive. I don't really see explosiveness in his game. There's more speed than some of the other 190 plus centimetre midfielders, but not a lot of explosiveness there for me. And I worry that some of the ways that he finds goals that really make him look like this forward of centre midfielder, they're coming from stoppage, which... when you've got younger guys kind of, even he's doing the rucking sometimes and he'll win the tap out, grab the ball out of the ruck and kick a goal. Like, is that going to happen at AFL level? I'm not sure how that crosses over, to be honest. We'll just go through more of these. So the running patterns I've given a 4. He's predictably going to pop up with 25 disposals. So I think that part of his game is pretty good. In some games, he's had lower disposal counts because he has been pushed forward. His repeat running, I've given a 4. He shows that, again, for his size, it's a pretty good running capacity he seems to have. His power, strength, and tackle breaking ability at this level is brilliant. So I've given him a 5 there. Versatility, a 4. And this is where I don't think he's really showing his potential. Like, I would still worry about putting Smiley as a forward because he hasn't been able to show that outright contested marking ability like a key forward could in the mid-190s. Haven't seen it in the same way that we've seen it with like a Lawler or a Harvey Langford even at this stage. So then you go to agility, which is a 3. He's a 194 centimetre midfielder. You wouldn't really expect that. So it leaves him with a 40 out of 50 and a 5th place finish on my list. I think at this, like the projection for a player in the AFL at the moment, it's very much like a Tom Green for me. So it's not a 194 centimetre kind of Bontempelli-esque where he's just got that sublime skill and movement as well as being that tall. I think Smiley definitely has some deficiencies, and still, even like with the versatility there that I had him as a 4, like he still lacks some versatility given the size. So I think the back end of the season is going to be really interesting for Smiley to where he ends up, but I've got him at 5 and I'm sort of pretty comfortable with him there. Still a great player, mind you, having said all that stuff. So we'll go on to the next one. It's Harvey Langford, another giant midfielder, as they often are these days, 190 centimetres. He's been kicking goals and racking up 30 touches for fun for the Dandenong Stingrays lately. I've given him a 5 for cleanliness. He rarely fumbles the ball. He can take it at its highest point and use his reach when he's working in the clearance phase of the game. He can also take the ground ball pretty well. I've got his ability to find the ball and win those contested possessions at 4. Doesn't have the 6th sense, I guess, in that area. I would say is like an Ashcroft or a Jagger Smith, but still very good. And then the decision making is also a 4. Again, I think he's sort of that more powerful midfielder where he's sort of driving the ball forward. He doesn't always. I think there's options where he can use a more sophisticated, more cultured sort of a handball to get them out into a cleaner spot, and he'll just sort of take it on himself and kick long. So still an above average player. Like, he doesn't make bad decisions, and particularly if he's got some space when he's coming out of the clearance, he can hit those low darts inside forward 50, which brings us on to the kicking, which I've given him a 4. I wanted to go 5 here, but I'm not sure if he has like all of the kicks. He's not that good on his opposite side of the body, which plenty of these players aren't, to be fair. I love a certain type of kick that he does when he comes out of clearance and kicks inside forward 50, but can sometimes like miss a target, which is why I haven't gone to the top level. We've got then the speed and explosiveness, which I've given him a 2. Like, he has really no speed at all. Not really an explosive player too for that size. So he's strong, but not someone that's absolutely like tearing out Chris Judd style, if you want to talk about it like that. His running patterns, always able to find the football, and he's really inevitable at even in the transition phases of the game of being a part of one of those chains from the back half. I think that's really strong. His repeat sprinting and endurance, I've given a 4. I think he runs hard. He doesn't hit that top speed level like some of the other players, but he certainly runs out games really, really well. And you never see him have like lulls where he's just not touching the football. Power, strength, tackle breaking ability at 5. His one-on-one stuff's fantastic. And, he can hold players off at clearance phases of the game and throw the ball in the boot and kick goals, which is fantastic. Again, the same as what I talked about with Smiley, though. It's, can you do that at the top level? That's going to be a test and somewhat of a risk, I suppose, for AFL clubs looking at that statistic. Versatility, he gets a 5. I think Langford could play anywhere on a football field. You could put him inside forward 50, he'll mark the ball, he'll fly at the ball. You could put him in defensive 50, he'll intercept, and he can hit targets with that nice left boot as well. His agility, I've given a 3. Not someone that has a lot of agility, really. 190 centimetres. He's a bit lumbering across the field, so doesn't have speed, doesn't have agility, but has some other real strengths there. And if you look at what Richmond have done with the players that they've targeted to get into their VFL matches, he's one that they are probably considering with a number 1 pick. So Langford ends up with 40 out of 50, which gives him a 6th place overall. The player comparisons I really like are Jordan Dawson and Hayden Young. So when you throw in the left boot, I think he's really like them. He doesn't have the pace of those players. So then I bring in Josh Dunkley as the next one. So a bit slower, a bit more cumbersome with his running, but he has more of the foot skills of the other two, and he's that bigger body like Dawson and Young as well. Murphy Reid is 7th on the list, and he's one of the smoothest, silkiest, most intellectual footballers, I would say, on this list. He comes in at 7th, and I've got him 5 for the first 3 categories. He's amazing with his cleanliness at ground level. He finds the football, 27 disposals per game. A lot of that coming from clearance. He was Vic Metro's best player at the Carnival as well as a midfielder, always able to find the football. And his decision-making is absolutely sound. And his actual technique in some of those skills, like his kicking and that sort of thing, sort of belies the fact that his decision-making just is so good and at such a high level that it kind of compensates for the fact that he has some deficiencies in those areas. I've given his kicking a 4, just because particularly when he's doing that stuff like around the body kicking, he's always able to put enough on the ball that it gets to where he wants it to go, even though perhaps it's not the most technically sound thing that we've talked about. You talk about the next thing there, his power and explosiveness isn't really there. I think he's quite strong and he can body up on players in one-on-one situations, but doesn't really have any, major speed, major explosiveness. So you kind of have to mark him down there. There's a ceiling, especially. His running patterns are definitely above average. That goes into being a coachable player, one of the smarter players in this draft. And then when you start to go to the athletic traits, it probably starts to drop off a little bit. So it doesn't have that high level running where he can just fly into contests repeatedly, one after the other, but he does have the smart running patterns that sort of compensate for that. His power, strength, and tackle breaking ability, just an average score there for Murphy Reid. Like he's not going to, you can't really park him inside 50 and he's going to outpower somebody there, but he's probably going to do something clever with his body where he can actually win the one-on-one. So that's a really tricky one to judge. His versatility, I think, is actually huge. I've given him, in this area, a 4. So an above average for the versatility. I think he can play on every part of the ground. You could play him on the wing even. He'd just find a way to do it really well. The reason I haven't given him a 5 is because I think he still just lacks, he's not 190 centimetres, so he doesn't take too many overhead marks, albeit I think for his size even, he's quite good at that. But he's not elite in any of those levels, and his body probably caps some of that upside, if you get me. His agility, I've given him a 4 in that area. I think his agility is pretty good, but again, not at like the Jagger Smith, FinnO'Sullivan level. So it leaves Murphy Reid with a 40 out of 50 score. The players that I've got him right up against is still side bottom is the one that kind of stands out as that player that can just go anywhere, always plays well, consistent. I've got Nick Del Santo there, who I think he sort of, like with the ball in hand, he kicks a little bit like a Nick Del Santo. I've mentioned the Harry Sheezel comparison. And the other one I like from a few years ago is Jimmy Bartell. I think just being that sort of in and under sort of hard-nosed type player like Jimmy Bartell, I think Murphy Reid has elements of that, but then they also share some traits with the way that they kick the ball. Like Jimmy Bartell didn't seem to kick the ball particularly well also, like with the penetration and the actual technique as well, but he always got the job done. He was really skillful like Reid, and just started to think about that one the other day, and it kind of came into my head, and I was like, there is a similarity there. Jimmy Bartell a little bit better overhead for sure, but I think there's some similarities there, which moves us on to number 8, and this feels really harsh on this player. So Levi Ashcroft comes in at 8 here for me, and I think the Matrix hasn't been too kind to him. I think he's a brilliant footballer, but if you're talking about projecting and upside and those sorts of things, I think he's such a clever player. He's had a dad that's played AFL. He's got a brother that plays AFL. They've got to be great sort of sounding boards for him to go to and be able to get some of the skills that he's got, and particularly that's where it shines in his game. Like, such a good clearance player, which and just some of the details in his game. Like I posted a video during the week, just a handball that he was able to release. I said, it looks like Ashcroft fired this handball out of a gun because it'll be just like getting the boot to ball or getting the ball to boot or getting the ball to his hand super fast in a super difficult situation, which is able to release someone. And again, it's like drawing the players towards you, getting in there, executing the skill, and then getting out. And a lot of that time when you're actually at games live watching Ashcroft, you don't notice the details, and then you come back and you watch the film that you've done and you go, oh, I didn't actually see that, but that's quite special how he was able to execute that. So I've given him 5 for the first 3 categories, the ball control, the hands, the football winning ability. But what this matrix doesn't take into consideration is leadership and competitiveness and I guess like ego a little bit as well. Like imagine you watched Ashcroft, he went out with the VFL team the other week and just like picks up 35 touches and pretty much walked into Brisbane's VFL program and went, guys, like you're going to give the ball to me. There's something very admirable about that, I think, and something that this matrix isn't sophisticated enough to tell you. So that kind of marks him down why he's sitting 8th on the list. We look at his sort of outside elements to his game, and I think like the ceiling's a little bit capped. I've given him a 3 for kicking. I don't think his kicking has any kind of major upside, I suppose. Like he's a decent kick. He makes good decisions, but I don't think you're really riding home about that kick, and it's the different varieties of kicks. So he's not an Errol Goulden, he's not a Nick Dacos there. Decent penetration, but I just think he's like an average kick, really. Speed and explosiveness, the same. He's not slow, but he's not someone that gets up like a real head of steam. He just just goes, he finds the football, he gets involved in the game, and he makes really sound, really detail-orientated decisions in tight areas on the ground. His running patterns are probably the best. Like as far as being able to do the least amount of work to have an impact on the game, particularly in that transition phase, is huge. Repeat running and endurance, you've got to give him good marks for. I've given him a 4 here, so above average there. I think that's really good, albeit he doesn't have much of a top line pace there. Power, strength, and tackle breaking ability, I've given him just the average score. Again, don't think he's particularly strong. He does good work at the clearance phase, but and he can certainly handle himself one-on-one, but he's not exceptional in that area. Versatility, he's not really exceptional there either. I think he's pretty much a midfielder, and that's it. And then again with agility. So really on this matrix, letting Ashcroft down is the athletic ability, but he's certainly one of the best footballers on the list. It leaves him with 39 out of 50, and I struggle to find a really good player comparison. I mean, he's a little bit like his brother. I think they're slightly different. I think maybe Will's a bit more of a power runner, a bit more outside, and Ashcroft's a little bit more inside than Ashcroft. I've gone with Andy Brayshaw. I think they're both players that don't have a huge amount of athletic ability. Like Brayshaw's probably a better runner and that player that can kind of link the defensive line to the forward line really well with his meterage and his ball carrying. Ashcroft less like that and more of a stoppage player, and that's probably why he's, again, for me, like on my values, he's come out. I do value ball movement pretty high on what I like to see, and it's something that catches my eye if a player can be really dynamic, really explosive with ball movement. And Ashcroft's probably not that player. He's more of the details and the nuance of being a stoppage and a clearance player. So not someone that I gravitate to as much, but like he's put together an unbelievable season. And if you had him as number 1, like you couldn't really begrudge it. Leo Lombard is next at number 9, so 39 out of 50 as well he rated. I think he's got some really powerful attributes with his his power running, his top speed's really good, his tackle breaking ability, just an absolute steal for the Gold Coast to get this guy through. I haven't given him like huge marks in the ball handling part. I think like his decision making, particularly around clearance, he's more bash and crash than the nuance there. So gets caught holding the ball a little bit when he could release it. So marked him down there. His cleanliness is still above average. He's a top 10 level draft player. And then it's sort of I won't go through all of his stuff, but yeah, the athletic stuff that he's good at, the speed, the strength, and and his repeat sprinting, and I think his patterns are pretty good as well. The player I've got actually there for him, so he comes up 9th with 39 out of 50, and the player I've got for him there is Ben Keys, which sounds a bit random, but I think just the way that they run really powerfully. Lombard's a little bit smaller, and I think Lombard's more of maybe like a small forward type hybrid as well as being a midfielder, but it's something the way just that they power through, keep the ball in front of them all the time, and don't really take a backward step. And then they're really smart players at the same time, so a similarity there. And then there's one of the most exciting players in this top 10, I think, is Beau Allen. I've got him at 10th. And I think there's still a rawness to Beau Allen, which is why I haven't marked him as high on this sort of matrix. But yeah, I've given him a 4 for his cleanliness. I think there's still a rawness there with Beau Allen. He can take a double touch every now and then. For his sheer ball winning ability, he hasn't been able to show that like absolutely purely consistently. So just an average mark for ball winning. And decision making, there's still sort of like a kamikaze nature, as I said. Like when he comes into clearance and stuff, you've got people sort of hanging off him, and he can get like some good handballs out, but a lot of it's just like knock forward stuff. So I've given him an average mark there. His kicking, I love it. He's got that similar to Harvey Langford, that real drilling low left boot, similar to Jordan Dawson. The running ability there, I think, is next to speed and explosiveness. So he does have that. Like, he looks a real athlete more than a footballer at this point, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But he still does have good football skills. We'll go through to the last one. So, like, repeat running. I think he's, as I said, like, he's a really good runner. Tackle breaking ability and versatility, like all of that sort of stuff. Like, he could play anywhere on the ground, this guy. He can break tackles. He's over 190 centimeters. The world's really the limit with what you did with this guy. It's just, are you taking him over someone that like a Jagger Smith or someone like that, or a Harvey Langford who's consistently putting up 30 disposal performances? That's going to be the things that recruiters weigh up. He got 38 out of 50 on the matrix, putting him 10th overall. And honestly, the player that comes to mind the most with Beau Allen is Koutoufides. Just that guy you can imagine like winning a clearance by picking the ball up with one hand, kind of breaking a tackle, fighting people off and releasing a handball, and then running forward with his athleticism, flying across a pack, taking a mark, that sort of thing. So he's got super upside. He's super exciting to watch play football, but probably hasn't put as far as the game level appearances together as some of the others. So he comes in at 10. I'm really excited by him, and I think with a few games left in the season, like I really want to watch him a bit more closely. And he's one like off the ball stuff I haven't been able to watch. I haven't seen him play one single live game of football, so that's really difficult. That is pretty much my top 10 midfielder video here. So again, I want to reiterate just that it's purely like my values, or not even purely everything. Like, I haven't included everything into this matrix. It's just a bit of a guide. Some way you can kind of see what I'm like rating the players on without going into it super, super deeply, and a way that you can follow along with numbers as opposed to me just saying, I think this guy is number one, and not really giving a reason. So that's kind of why I made this video. I've got plenty of stuff coming up. I'm going to have more club videos coming out for, who clubs could draft with their kind of list needs and that sort of thing. I've also got some stuff coming out around the draft combine as well, which is coming up really, really soon. So kind of the reasons and things that recruiters look for within that draft combine. So I'm excited for that one as well. I think that is a wrap for this video. If you have any, questions about how I did this, or you have any discrepancies, things that you, players that you would prefer to see in there, or players that you rated a little bit highly, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.